it seems like Eric Holder has authorized an investigation into the killing of Dr. Tiller. So what you're saying is you believe that this should be expanded to look at this entire problem of right-wing extremism? I mean, when Janet Napolitano came out with her report a month or two ago talking about the possible threat of right-wing extremists, she was attacked by the Republican Party, and they insisted that she take that out of the report. Weeks later, we saw the killing of Tiller. We saw the Holocaust attack. We saw the police in Pittsburgh.
Right, 3 policemen in Pittsburgh gunned down.
And so it seemed like she was right, but my point is, you're saying that you want Eric Holder to look at this broadly and use all the arsenal that's in his repertoire to deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the range of issues, there was a mother, father, and child shot in their own home recently by some Border Patrol vigilantes. You have 3 policemen gunned down in Pittsburgh by someone convinced that they are coming to take his guns away. You have a black security guard at the Holocaust Museum gunned down, and an abortion clinic doctor killed. You have people waving signs such as "God hate fags," and in the case of Dr. Tiller's murder, "God brought the killer," at rallies held by, quote, peaceful Christians, as in contrast to the people actually pulling the trigger. You have the National Rifle Association that all through the last stages of Barack Obama's presidential campaign was sending out leaflets and emails to people saying that if he came to power, they, quote unquote, would be taking your guns away, something that was cited both by the killer in Pittsburgh and the Holocaust Museum murderer in the note found in his car. Again, it doesn't take much imagination to understand where this is going. And it's actually worse than if it was a conspiracy of one little group that you could infiltrate. It is a mindset, a philosophical view of the world, which essentially has become fundamentally anti-American. And I think this is the new thought for people. And I talk about that in my book, Crazy for God, as one of the reasons I got out of the movement. Just to give it context, if you accept the interpretation of the fact that, for instance, Jane Fonda going to Hanoi during the Vietnam War was treasonous or anti-American, which is what the people who were in favor of the Vietnam War would have called it, you have to also accept the fact that when you have a group of people who hate their own country to the extent that they are seriously talking about equating our president with Hitler, calling him a communist, the Antichrist, and all these other names that they put on Barack Obama, on one hand, and or looking at things like Hitler's Germany and the Holocaust and equating that with legal abortion and Roe v. Wade, if you look at that level of rhetoric and loathing for one's country, and the same thing when it comes to gay unions or gay marriage, gay rights in general, you have to understand that the far right of the evangelical/fundamentalist movement, however much it wraps itself in the American flag, hates the United States of America. The America they love is a mythical place that A, never existed and certainly doesn't exist now, of white American Christians who live according to biblical principle, and by that I mean both Old and New Testament principle, who come like the Puritans came to the Bay State Colony to be a city set on a hill as an example to the fallen human race, to show them not the way, but the only way to God, and all the rest is something to be avoided as sinful. And so when the far right of the evangelical movement looks around at America as it actually exists, not in their minds, but as it actually exists, they hate their country. And what the logic of what they are doing actually would lead to is not just a change in things like the legalization of abortion or gay rights, but a rolling back of what we consider to be democracy and replacing it with what would look to us like Iran's version of a theocracy. And so the fact is that when people like Eric Holder and the Justice Department look at these groups, this is not bedrock, quote, real America that people like Sarah Palin talks about. This is not your small town Norman Rockwell ideal. These are people who have within their midst folks that are so paranoid, frightened, and deluded that they are hiding weapons, as some of these secessionist movements in Alaska and other places have done, in their yards against the day when the United Nations or the forces of the Antichrist, or you name it, take over and they need to defend themselves. These are people who believe that God mandated the gold standard, that paying taxes is evil, that it is patriotic to not pay taxes, that all government programs are bad, that God created black people as inferior to white people. As Rousses Rushdoony, who was the founder of what's called the Dominionist or the Theonomist movement, who I knew well, who's now deceased, wrote in his big book on the subject, some people are created by God to be slaves. Now, not all evangelical fundamentalists believe all or any of these things, but there is a movement, and it's a big movement within this country, that essentially takes some of what they regard as biblical teachings, applies it to the United States, finds America so lacking in measuring up to these standards that they literally want to overthrow the order that we now know. And they look at people like Obama, progressives in Congress, the Supreme Court, as illegitimate, as usurpers of the Founding Fathers' actual intent. And so from their point of view, what it's really all about is revolution. Now, that doesn't mean every single one of them are going to be charging into the Holocaust Museum shooting people, but it does mean there's going to be a steady drumbeat that creates an environment in which individuals, and it doesn't take many to wreak real havoc, become increasingly violent. Just as the anti-tax movement hasn't resulted in every single American who reads books about why you shouldn't pay federal taxes to actually not pay, because most people don't have the courage to do that, but there are a few who don't, and they go to jail, some get caught, some don't, and so forth. So the problem is not that there's some mass movement that's going to become massively violent. The problem is there's a mass movement within evangelical Christianity that spins off people at regular intervals who take seriously what the leaders say but don't have the courage to do personally. And essentially, just to sum it up, it's an anti-American movement. It despises the United States as it is. It wants to see the federal government overthrown and pushed back. And when it comes to individual things such as abortion clinic doctors, they believe that they are doing God's work by either killing these people or supporting the people who do want to kill them.